that.
Thank you. Dr. Burgess is recognized.
Thank you, and I want to thank all of you. This has really been an enlightening discussion. Mr. O'Malley, I will agree with you about that Energy Independence Security Act. In December of 2007, I had been here 6 years in the United States House of Representatives, and that was by far the most troubling piece of legislation that came through. I'm on the Committee of Energy and Commerce. It came through our subcommittee, our full committee, came through on the floor, came back from a conference committee. I was astounded at what a bad idea it was, and really disappointed when President Bush signed that legislation, and we saw the immediate effects with the rise in the price of gasoline in the summer, the rise of the rate of rise of the price of commodities with food to fuel diversion. Our automobile manufacturers almost overnight were placed into crisis because of having to retool their manufacturing, and on top of all of that, you couldn't even read all of that bad news because our light bulbs changed. So I thought that was a very bad idea, and in fact, you may be interested, there's a House bill now, a current bill, H.R. 424, called the Level Act, to back out that ethanol blend wall that you described because of just the reason that you described. Yeah, E10 may be a problem for some folks. I spent a lot of time down at my lawnmower repairman because of things that happened to those small motors because of the ethanol in gasoline. No one has been able to convince me from Department of Energy or the Environmental Protection Agency that they have done the studies on the engines to assure that E15 will not be further damaging to those engines. And furthermore, I'm not sure who bears the liability for the sale of that gasoline that goes into those engines that then subsequently ruins them. And I suspect as a manufacturer, as a refiner, you probably have some concerns about that as well. Is that correct?
That's very correct. We're not going to deliver E15. We're not going to deliver E15 because we're concerned it'll be the same circus that we had with MTBE, that we destroy motor vehicles. I own outboard motors, drive around a little boat, and there's no way I will put gasoline combined with ethanol in it because it will destroy the engine. The EPA has not done an appropriate scientific study. This was rushed through the EPA. Exactly why, I don't know. But in all fairness to the discussion, I've theorized that cellulosic ethanol might have been invented by President Bush when he was down chopping wood on the ranch. The whole idea of ethanol, again, I would point out from my industry standpoint, bring them on. Just don't mandate it and don't subsidize it, particularly when we don't have the money to subsidize anything. The country's on the road to bankruptcy, and here we are talking about more subsidies for this or that. The country doesn't have the money for subsidies.
I feel compelled to point out that although that was the worst legislation I'd seen to date, there's been a lot worse stuff that's happened since then. And if you want to talk about subsidies, we can talk about that darn health care law. Where we are well on the road to ruin from that. But again, I'd point out to you the Level Act, H.R. 424, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on that. I am trying to get some enthusiasm for that at the committee level. I just have to ask you, you brought up the issue of the renewable identification numbers. I have had constituents in my office back home in Texas who have purchased RINs from various outfits only to find out that they were basically a parking lot for a church next door and there was no manufacturing or production facility at the address. There is an enormous amount of fraud in this, and the Environmental Protection Agency seems to be taking a hands-off approach. And what essentially has happened is we have created the mortgage-backed security industry over again without all the transparency and market securitization that was present in that industry. You have people literally selling blue sky to unsuspecting parties who then are left holding the bag, and the EPA simply says, well, buyer beware, but it's their program. They set it up. They created this nightmare, and unfortunately now we have people who are suffering the economic hardship of having bought something that in fact did not exist.
I have had direct discussions with Bob Percisepi, the number 2 person at the EPA on this subject, and Margot Ogi, who's the head of the fuel section there. And I've expressed my amazement at the fact that they approved companies to issue these RINs. They approved them based on a flyby, I suppose, of the church parking lot. And now the industry went out and bought these RINs from these approved parties, and the EPA says, well, you made the mistake, you have to pay for it. It is one of the worst abuses of government power that I have seen in my long career of dealing with the government. It's an amazing situation. The only way to cure it, in my view, is eliminate the program, because the program is idiotic. Every barrel of this biofuel that we buy, we make diesel at a cost of somewhere around $4 to the consumer, $4 a gallon. When we buy these RINs, that biodiesel costs you $6, $7, $8 a gallon. Is this an intelligent thing? And if the population, the quote American people that the Congress always talks about, actually knew this, I believe they'd stand up and revolt. But somehow we've hidden it under the covers. And it's just a dumb program.
It absolutely is, Mr. Chairman. I hope we will have the opportunity to have further hearings on this and have the EPA in attendance, because Mr. O'Malley's exactly right. This is a massive fraud that's being perpetrated on the American people, and it is the mid-level producer who's left holding the bag for $10 million, which they can ill afford to lose, and we're going to drive people out of business, drive people into bankruptcy. Is this the type of job creation that we should be pursuing? Absolutely not. Mr. O'Malley, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Dr. Burgess. And Mr. O'Malley, please don't.